this feels bigger than the Errol Spence fight. It's different. You know, Errol Spence fight was big for the urban community.
We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live, Boxing Ego unpack. Yeah. We unpack. We unpack. We unpack. Coming to you live.
Okay, you need people like me, so you can point your finger and say that's the bad guy. Get ready to say that's the bad guy. Terence Crawford claims that he feels his upcoming fight with Israil Madrimov feelings, nothing more than feelings. He feels that the fight with Madrimov is somehow bigger than his fight with Errol Spence. Cap or fact? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. We unpacked. Terence Crawford, they did the grand arrivals, and I'm not going to spend too much time, but I will say I wasn't really a fan of Crawford Madrimov grand arrivals. As I've stated several times, I'm not really a fan of DAZN's commentary. There's a lot of shoot the breeze type of unnecessary conversations that are being had on the mic, and I really want to hear the boxing stuff. They'll be talking about, oh, I ate spaghetti bolognese and I like tortillas, and like just a bunch of random stuff that literally has nothing to do with it. Like for the Crawford Madrimov, they pulled up, and I actually wasn't a fan of this also, but they pulled up in classic cars. They had someone driving Madrimov all down the pier, Santa Monica, real slow, you know, making slow turns. Then he finally walks up, he gets close enough, walks up on the stage, and then you got to wait for Crawford to come out on, you know, some kind of Corvette, like it's a political, like president's parade, or it's like a parade or something. But it was too much. It felt bloated to me, right? Not to mention, this is a stack card, so you have a lot of fights. So this was after you've already seen Pitbull Cruz, Rayo, and Andy Ruiz Jr., Gerald Miller. And I'm not a big fan. Like, let's say it's a movie. If the movie is perfect and could be, like, you could tell the story definitively in an hour and 40 minutes, then it needs to be that length, period. But if you ever watch a movie and you're like, that would have been better, instead of 2 hours and 49 minutes, it probably would have been better maybe at the 2 hour mark, and just be a little bit tighter with the editing, cut out some scenes and stuff like that. That's how I feel about most DAZN boxing broadcasts. And this grand arrivals really was no different. It just felt bloated, unnecessary, took too long. The commentators are talking about, oh, I don't like cars and I like muscle cars, and it's just really not, it's not for me. I'm a boxer head. I wanted to see what the fighters look like, size them up, stuff like that. So it wasn't entertaining. Then you finally get the main event, and you know, I can't really fault Madrimov. He's the B-side. English is not his first language. His English was actually pretty solid, but it was kind of boring. You did all this like parade style drive up stuff, and then they walked on the stage, faced off, didn't say anything, didn't smile. It didn't really feel that tense. And then the commentators interview Terence Crawford after they interview Madrimov, and that was it. I'm much more a fan. I've been to some really great grand arrivals in Las Vegas, and that style is better. Like Canelo grand arrivals for the Golovkin fight, you know, Broner and Pacquiao, that was a nice grand arrivals, stuff like that. This just felt long for no reason. So that's that. But afterwards, they did the little face-off. Terence Crawford and Madrimov, they went and spoke to the DAZN commentators who were a little bit away, and they're trying to build the fight. Madrimov, again, his English, he's working on it. He didn't really say too much. He was just kind of cool, kind of like a baby Triple G. Hey, I'm not guys, Max, it's not, you know, just real chill and, you know, saying he wanted to prove himself in the fight. But then we get to Terence Crawford. I'm going to play what Terence Crawford said just so we're all in the clear, so I can really unpack, because some things I don't mind paraphrasing, but I want you to hear it from the horse's mouth, verbatim what Crawford said. Let's get set up. Roll the clip. So let's get ready. Let's get to it. Now, this is Terence Crawford immediately after the Grand Arrivals face-off. Let's unpack it. This is the host on DAZN.
Back to you. I'm going to try and not make mistakes. Remember what he said to you. How do you compare this to the Errol Spence fight? I mean,
how do you compare this to the Errol Spence fight?
Spence fight. I mean, again, that was like a generational big fight, one we've been waiting for.
That was a generational big fight, one we've been waiting for
5 or 6 years. How do you compare it? Because both big fights, but both quite different.
To be honest, this feels bigger than the Errol Spence fight.
Oh my. To be honest, this feels bigger than the Errol Spence fight.
You look around, it's different.
If you look around, it's different.
If you look around, it's different.
It's different.
Errol Spence fight was big for the urban community.
This man, Terence Crawford, said the Errol Spence fight was big for the urban community. What does that even mean? Black folk?
Big for the it's different. You know, Errol Spence fight was big for the urban community, because it's been something that's been talked about for 5 years.
Why was that big for the urban community?
Me and Errol. But when you look around, you see so many different races and cultures that it's bigger in its own right.
He said, but now when you look at Crawford Madrimov, you see so many different races and cultures around. It's bigger in its own right.
Indeed. We're gonna.
And I can't go nowhere without seeing a Riyadh season poster, Crawford Madrimov poster. I don't care where I'm at. People send me.
He's saying he's seen the posters.
The posters in New York, Omaha, California. You can't go nowhere out without seeing a fight, and that's what makes it big.
Okay. So let's quickly recap. You guys heard it. Audio wasn't the clearest, so let me just reiterate. He said that, to be honest, I feel this fight with Madrimov feels bigger than Errol Spence fight. Then he started stuttering a little bit and said, the Errol Spence fight was big for the urban crowd. What black fighter says that? Urban crowd. That sounds weird. Just the phrasing of it, to me. You guys could make excuses, but to me, the phrasing sounds a bit weird. The urban, because who on earth said that Errol Spence Crawford was an urban fight or steered or geared towards any kind of urban community? It's on Premier Boxing Champs at the time on Showtime. Steven Espinoza was, kind of running the show over there. And that wasn't like an urban fight at all. I mean, yes, it had two black American fighters, if that's what he's referring to, but there were many people. Errol Spence has a lot of Mexican fans too, because of his action style, right? And just people who respect Crawford and respect Errol Spence. So I didn't really realize that was a demographic fight until Terence Crawford said that. So I don't even understand why he said that statement. Again, I'm not Crawford, you got to ask him. But he's saying it appealed to like an urban demographic. And he said, this feels different. You look around, you see all different races. Like, that was just a weird statement. Like, is that a comfort zone to see a melting pot of different races instead of just black and brown people? I don't know. Just a weird weird statement and weird way to phrase it. Really seems like Crawford needs a PR person. But here's the other thing. I live in California. I don't live in SoCal. I'm up north, but SoCal's my second home. You were in Santa Monica, which is perhaps one of the most touristy place. Like, you would liken Santa Monica to probably like Chelsea or Manhattan in New York currently, you know, Times Square. It's like kind of a touristy part in LA. Like, if you wanted bomb Mexican food, you would go to East LA, you know what I mean? You would go to Compton. Like, if you just want some real, like a good burger, Mexican food, you probably wouldn't go to Santa Monica unless you just happened to be out there because you were walking the pier or whatever. So Santa Monica, he's talking about, you see this smorgasbord of different ethnicities and races. That's because you picked, you know, kind of one of the most touristy spots, or not him, but the promoters, the organizers, they have you in Santa Monica. So he said, look around and you see all these different people, as if that's something to be marveled about. Yeah, you're in Santa Monica. What do you expect? You go to anywhere like Venice Beach or Santa Monica or Times Square, you're going to see a variety of folks. Now, let's talk about the bigger. And see, this is what I'm saying regarding Terence Crawford, why I've coined the phrase bad business bud, because he seems to be impressed or enamored. Oh, if you look around, they got Riyadh season posters everywhere. Who cares? Like, what does that represent? To me, that's like mind-boggling to say that the fight feels bigger, because in business, it's not really about feelings or emotion. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. So I didn't really understand any of this dialogue from Terence Crawford. You know, the whole urban community and this fight feels bigger than the Spence. I don't know any boxing fan that is really going to agree to that. Now, he didn't say, because I seen people when I posted this on my other social medias, right? When I posted on my other social medias, you know, the Bud Buddies, they tried to come to his defense, which that's what you can expect from man fans. So they said stuff like, oh, he didn't mean it like that. Oh, this and that. It's always like some clever justification. And they said, oh, what he meant to say was, but you're putting words in his mouth. We can only go off what he articulated. You see what I'm saying? I hate when people do that, when they have this like weird interpretation that based on the usage and the linguistics of what the person said, the vernacular, they didn't say what you're saying that they meant by it. So I can only go off of what Crawford actually said. And he said the fight feels bigger than the Errol Spence, which leads me to my next point we unpacked. Business is not about feelings and what it feels like. The reality is, I like the card personally. I'm excited for the card personally, but the same can't be said for the Southern Californians based on the ticket sales. I've already made a video about it. They said the ticket sales were struggling. Even Tim Bradley, who's always co-signed Terence Crawford, said that on Pro Box TV. He says he talked to people in LA. Keep in mind, Bradley is from SoCal. I'm up north, but Bradley's actually from the desert in SoCal. And he said he was commentating the fight and he was asking people, and he said the tickets are struggling. And he's in the industry and he's from that region, SoCal, right? I've already made a video. I'll probably put a card at the end of this video because I'm the best in the business and it's not even close. So watch that first video after this video. So the tickets are struggling. I know that to be true, and I'll show you why. Boom. Crawford said the Madrimov fight feels bigger. And again, I told you it's not about feelings than the Errol Spence fight on PBC. So to me, I think Crawford was trying to be petty and he likes working with Turkey. He never really trusted Al Heyman or PBC. He looked at them and his team looked at them as kind of like the ops. So he was trying to send shots, but he didn't really articulate a statement that I think most people are going to resonate with here, because it sounds foolish to say that the fight is bigger than the Errol Spence fight. Errol Spence, undisputed. Errol Spence had done the heavy lifting. Errol Spence is more known, especially here in the States, than the Israil Madrimov. Again, we're on fight week. This is not my personal opinion. I like the card. And actually, my favorite fight on the card is Rayo versus Pitbull. It's not even the main event, but I digress. The bottom line is I don't have a problem with the card, but we need boxing to have accountability. A lot of people, because Crawford is a great fighter, he is a skilled fighter, he's a sharpshooter. I've never said anything different than that. But I feel a lot of people don't want to have fair, constructive criticism and conversation and dialogue because Crawford's a good fighter. So they just let other things slide when he says stuff that really doesn't make sense. Like saying that this fight somehow with Madrimov feels bigger because they got posters everywhere or whatever he was saying, and it's not geared towards the urban community and these types of things. There's no way this fight feels bigger. I was actually surprised that the fight felt so dead on fight week. How many of you guys, just hand over heart, before watching this video, meaning you've already watched it, how many of you watched the Grand Arrivals? If you watch the Grand Arrivals and you're now listening to me in real time, you watched it yesterday, then say I did. If you have not watched the Grand Arrivals, say I didn't. However, when Errol Spence had his fight week, people were paying attention to everything fight week related. I know that for a fact because I was getting crazy viewership making the content, because I remember specifically I was saying that both Errol Spence and Terence Crawford actually looked sucked up a bit at the Grand Arrivals. So let me know in the comment section if you even watched the Grand Arrivals. So I'm still struggling to find out how this Madrimov fight feels bigger, right? And again, people are trying to justify, say, oh, he meant it's a bigger card, and oh, he meant it's international appeal. He didn't say that. That's not what he said. And you can argue that it has a better undercard, but that's because they work with promoters from, Top Rank to PBC to Eddie Hearn, So yeah, you have a stacked undercard. But even with that stacked undercard, it still doesn't feel bigger than the Errol Spence fight. But let's get into this. I said Crawford said the Madrimov fight feels bigger than Errol Spence fight on PBC. So that was his way of throwing shots at PBC, in my opinion. But they just lowered the ticket prices and are suddenly offering a car sweepstakes on fight week. LOL. Ringside section went down to $350. If you previously stayed on top of it, and I'm the best in the business, so I stay on top of my job, these ticket prices for ringside were nowhere around these prices, which means by Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, they've already dropped the prices. So you have Eminem, and they've been heavily advertising Marshall Mathers. You see, I'm just Marshall Mathers, Marshall Mathers. I'm just a regular guy. I don't know why all the fuss about me. Nobody ever gave a f before. All they did was doubt me. Hey, yo, you might see me jogging. You might see me walking. You might see me walking the dead Rottweiler dog in the park, right? You got Marshall Mathers, and he just got a brand new album that came out. He's doing like a mini concert at the BMO Stadium. And the week of the fight, you're dropping the prices, which, leading back to my first video, stipulates that Crawford is not the draw that you think, and the ticket prices were probably too high. And perhaps this was not the right market. Boom. West Coast, you got a guy from Omaha, and then you got Madrimov, who's not really a big name in boxing, let alone, you would have been better off putting Pitbull Cruz, who, like, if you look at the videos and stuff that are out from the Grand Arrivals, Pitbull Cruz seems to be a celebrity. Like, he seems like the guy everyone's like getting pictures and autographs with because he's just fun to watch. But this section A4, they got 50 tickets under $400, so a little bit over $350. They were not this price previously. So again, I struggle to understand what Terence Crawford is talking about when he says that this fight with Madrimov is in any way, shape, form, or fashion bigger than the fight that he had with Errol Spence. It just, I don't see it. And hey, if you guys can explain in the comment section, let me know in the comments. More power to you. Ego don't see it. So again, why would you be lowering the ticket price? You have a star-studded undercard. Again, I'm gonna use the same analogy I made in the last video in case you missed it. Can you imagine if Gervonta Davis was fighting Frank Martin when he was undefeated? Let's say the fight didn't happen, and they gave him this Terence Crawford undercard in California, and it was this loaded. Let's say, you know, you had the Saudis that their it guy was Gervonta Davis, and then they loaded up the card with the Jared Anderson. You got both big babies, Big Baby Miller, Big Baby Anderson. You got Andy Ruiz. He's been on a layoff for 2 years. He's finally coming back. Bacoli. You got Andy Cruz, Olympian. You got David Morrell Jr. You got Rayo. You got Pitbull and Crawford Madrimov, and they discounted prices. This would not be the case if Tank Davis had this same card in California, same circumstance. Look at all the blue sections that still appear to be available tickets. And this is fight week. And the funny thing is they're playing little games. Shout out to Fred on X. But he's showing they're like pulling certain sections and then repricing them and doing all this stuff. It's very analogous to Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia. It's like Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia 2.0. So again, when your boy Ego, when I make a point, it tends to stick and make sense. Crawford is saying somehow, some way, in his opinion, somehow this is a bigger fight than the Errol Spence fight. But let me add this, because we unpacked, and I'm the best in the business and it's not even close. So I got to give you the facts. Boom. It says Saturday's Spence Crawford fight drew a gate of more than $21 million. And this was per person who was familiar. It was a sold out crowd, pretty much 20,000. 19,990 fans at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. The live gate was over 21 million. That compares to a gate of 22.8 million for Davis versus Garcia earlier in the year, another premier boxing champions involved fight. So the funny thing is this: Terence Crawford seemed like he had his other plans, and it was to circumvent PBC. He wanted to work with Turkey. He was willing to work with Top Rank. He was even willing to work with BLT Prime or whatever, right? He wants to go on DAZN, anything but sign to PBC. But last year, PBC had multiple, I think it was 3, live gates that were over 20 million, including Spence versus Crawford. So using what I've presented in this video in a detailed unpack, compare and contrast to what Terence Crawford is talking about and saying it feels bigger. Tell me what's bigger about it. Fight week feels dead. The Grand Arrivals, I know a lot of you guys probably didn't watch it. It has very low buzz, in my honest opinion, and hold me to this. I am all about accountability. Hold me to this. I seriously doubt that Crawford Madrimov, despite the depth of the undercard, and people's like, oh, this is the greatest card the world has seen in boxing, all that stuff, keep it. It's not, in my honest opinion, is not going to have a bigger live gate than Spence versus Crawford in Las Vegas. 2 different states, 2 different markets. So Crawford can say all the stuff he wants about, the urban market and it feels bigger. Show us. You should, if it feels bigger and you're basically saying and suggesting that this is being advertised better off of PBC. And, you know, Turkey and Riyadh season, they done a bang up, outstanding job, much better. Oh, I can't go anywhere without seeing banners and billboards and posters. Oh my. Then you should kill the live gate, because you have all of the supporting cast. You have a great, in fact, I want to see the undercard more than I want to see the main event. I'm not mad at the main event though. But what I'm saying is there's some fights like Jared Anderson, that's a step up. I'm curious to see how he looks versus Bacoli, because I rate Bacoli. You know, I always like watching David Morrell. I told you my favorite fight on this card is Pitbull versus El Rayo. And at one point they had Virgil Ortiz versus Tim Tszyu on this. So this was definitely going to be a monster card. I think the card was hit by Virgil Ortiz and Tim Tszyu, you know, kind of falling off the card, because that would have been another excuse. But again, if it kept Virgil Ortiz, Tim Tszyu, all of these fights would be bigger. Like, we're to the point where I get it. Crawford is a talent, but you can't force feed the public a star. And I think they're going to understand that. You could have put Pitbull Rayo in LA, where we have a big black and brown population, right? And I think the ticket sales and stuff would have been better. And then you could have put Andy Ruiz, who's from Imperial, and, you know, if it had Virgil Ortiz versus Tim Tszyu, which is another great fight, you could have put Crawford for real. And I'm not saying this in a disrespectful way. I'm just being real. Based on like anticipation and location, California, West Side. Crawford could have literally been like the fourth fight. You could have put like Pitbull, Cruz, Rayo, then probably Virgil Ortiz, Tim Tszyu. That was a really good fight. And then Andy Ruiz, Miller, you know, and you could have put those fights probably first, and then Crawford Madrimov, because Crawford Madrimov, it just doesn't really, in my opinion, I think it's a good fight for hardcore boxing fans. So I think the fight itself will deliver. Crawford's never in boring fights. Madrimov can fight. So I'm not talking about that. We're talking about the business of boxing. And I think from a business standpoint, when you're putting a fight in a location, you really got to kind of do what the public demands of that card. Like, I would never put, if you had like a fight in Arizona, Texas, Cali, or Vegas, where there's a lot of Mexican fans and Latino fans, it doesn't make sense to put Canelo on the undercard unless it was like a Floyd Mayweather card. But in today's generation, you wouldn't put Danny Garcia versus Edeslani Lara as the main event because you like Danny Garcia or have a great relationship with him, and then put Canelo versus Berlanga on the co-feature. It doesn't make sense when the co-feature is a more desired and anticipated fight than Danny Garcia versus Lara. And here's the thing, Danny Garcia versus Lara is not a bad fight, just like Crawford Madrimov is not a bad fight. But if you're, see, and this is the thing, this is my only issue with the Riyadh season thing that I'm noticing, is they have so much money that it doesn't have to make sense. You know, like, it seems and it appears that they're doing things that I don't know what the long-term goal is with some of these fights and in like the order of operations, because to be honest, I feel like Crawford Madrimov, you're gonna lose money. Like, you look at a guy like Eminem. Eminem is one of the top 5 rappers that probably charge a lot to perform, right? He probably gets that bag. There's other great rappers that would have been great, because we've already seen Crawford walk out with Eminem. It's already really been done. So you're gonna have to chip up and give Eminem that bag. So like, Eminem's bag is probably rivaling many of these fighters that are on this card in the top billing of the card. Whatever Eminem is getting, I would, to lure him out the house, I doubt he's doing it for free. You know what I mean? So you're spending all this money, and then for what? Because like I said, you have the Errol Spence, and Crawford won't admit this. Either he doesn't know or understand the business or whatever, bad business, but let's see if they can top 21 million, which is what PBC and Crawford versus Spence did. You can say all day that the fight feels bigger and you feel it's done differently and this is amazing with the banners, but all of that for what? To make less money? Because in business, that's what it should be about. It should be about making the almighty dollar, making revenue so you can hopefully continue to put on more shows and leave the people happy. And here's the thing is Errol Spence versus Crawford had the live gate that it had of $21+ million, and it didn't even have anywhere near an undercard as stacked as this. But it goes to show you, you can't force feed a star. Crawford's name being connected to Errol Spence is why the fight really sold. Now that he got past Errol Spence, we watched it and witnessed it, Crawford's star power kind of went back to what it's been, which is like great fighter, but not the biggest star, not necessarily a crossover star. It's kind of like Tyson Fury versus Wilder. Those two names together, people wanted to see the storyline and see it play out. But after they had their trilogy, Fury won the best of 3 in the trilogy. Then a lot of people who would argue, you know, UK versus USA and Wilder versus Fury, a lot of those people didn't care anymore. And they weren't watching Fury versus Chisora part 3 or whatever, right? And that's kind of what happened with Crawford. Another mistake that Crawford made is immediately after the fight, he was doing pretty good. He was on podcasts and things like that. But then he went back to what I think is his normal personality, which is not to really promote. So he was doing good on the Breakfast Club. He like revisited them and he was on a couple podcasts, but then he reverted back to his true form. And now it's been over a year since he's fought here with this fight in August, a little bit over a year, because he fought Errol, I want to say in July. And then he kind of lost some of the luster. And then on top of that, you have Madrimov, who's really just not a known commodity. And this is what they put as the main event. So I don't care what Crawford is saying in terms of it feels bigger. It's not. And I think when the numbers come out, the live gate is going to show that. Again, if it was bigger, then please explain why it won't do a $21 million plus gate, and then explain why, if you think the fight is truly bigger than the Errol Spence fight, then why does it feel like this? Why does it feel like dead door? And you're doing a weigh-in at 9 p.m. at night, which is really weird in the state of California. I got a video about that too. It's weird to do a weigh-in that late, you know, and it just makes me feel like some of the decision-making in this just really wasn't thought out. Putting Terence Crawford on the West Side, like in California, this is not really his market. You were better off bringing this card to Omaha or maybe even Vegas. But doing this fight in Cali, Crawford, again, he's skilled. A lot of people get mad at what I'm saying because it's the truth and because they just want to focus on the skill. Crawford is skilled. Nobody's taking that away from him. But being skilled in 2024 does not mean a crossover successful star who can sell. That these aren't the same thing. Like, you could say Dwayne The Rock Johnson is not the best actor, but he's one of the highest paid actors. You see what I'm saying? These things don't have to quote unquote make sense. He has an audience. He has certain type of roles that they choose to cast him with in Hollywood, and he's making a lot of money. Whether you like that or not, he's an asset to these movies with his brand, and people are casting him. You can get mad and be like, oh no, it doesn't make sense. You know, Timothy Chalamet or Tom Holland deserves more praise and money. Nobody cares about that. It's men lie, women lie, numbers don't. And Crawford, Bob Arum let you know about Crawford and said he was losing money on him and he don't want to really lose money on him. And he was like, it made sense for Top Rank and PBC to perhaps, even though it didn't happen, perhaps join forces to do the Crawford and Errol fight because you're going to lose money, and then at least it'd be less heat on one promotional entity to lose the money that, because you have to pay Errol a lot, you got to pay Crawford a lot. And then they got this stacked card with Crawford, Madrimov, and all these people that I went over throughout this video, and it just doesn't seem to have the appeal and the buzz. And I know in my heart of all hearts, if you gave the main event to Canelo and loaded up his card with all these Pitbull, just imagine Canelo and Pitbull on the same card. Like, just be for real. I know you guys want me to be wrong, but not this time, Utah. Imagine Canelo fighting California with Pitbull Cruz and El Rayo as the co-feature, and Andy Ruiz, someone who was in his gym on the undercard. It would be absolutely absurd. Whatever the amount of people are going to be at the weigh-in and the grand arrivals and stuff, just multiply that. Canelo would be absolutely crazy because he's one of the faces of boxing. The other person is Gervonta Davis. If you gave Gervonta Davis this same card and you were putting all your eggs in the basket of Gervonta Davis, and you have a guy he fought, Pitbull Cruz, fighting a guy he could fight, you know, the winner of that, and you gave him the same star-studded card, it's going to do better than this. You guys have to just admit what you're seeing. Crawford just doesn't seem to be at age 36. He'll be 37 next month in September. He just doesn't seem to be this massive draw. And again, I've said bad business, but a lot of these decisions you didn't make when you didn't make them, and now you're trying to correct that. I get that, but it doesn't always work like that. So I found the conversation to be weird, talking about the urban community was vested in the Errol Spence fight, and this fight feels bigger with multiple cultures and different races. You're in Santa Monica. What do you expect? How many people are buying the fight? What's that live gate hitting foe? We unpacked.